and that can't be good for your health. We're up close to the action as Roman Britain comes to life in Centurion. Sometime in the early 2nd century AD, a Roman legion stationed in Britain arguably disappeared from history. Just in case you thought you turned over to BBC4, I should explain that the enduring mystery of what became of the 9th Legion and the suggestion that it was destroyed in battle in Scotland has inspired not one, but 2 feature films due out this year. Neil Marshall, the director who managed to make a big international hit about potholing with The Descent, is first to have a go with Centurion, due for release on the 23rd of April. So when offered the chance to don swords, sandals and sensible waterproof togas and join Marshall and his cast on location, Film 2010 was hot to trot. Well, as they say, all roads lead to Rome. Sadly, what we got was a rather muddy forest just outside Dorking. Let us travel through the mists of time, back to a more elemental age where men were men, women were blue, and the Romans ruled this not very green and vaguely unpleasant land.
Scouts forward!
Blimus, I wouldn't go down there if I were you boys. Well, I did warn you. This is the Surrey set of Centurion, the new sword and sandals blood and guts epic from director Neil Marshall.
There's an ancient myth about the 9th Legion of Rome that marched into Scotland to deal with the Picts and vanished without a trace. And they supposedly disappeared in the Scotch mist. And as soon as I heard that, I was just fascinated as to what might have actually happened to them. And so this is kind of a hypothesis of the story of the 9th Legion.
It's a trap! Cannon! Shield! Stand down!
I play a guy called Quintus, who's an optio, which I guess was a corporal back then, but I suppose it's closer to what a lieutenant would be now. We're basically Romans behind enemy lines, and we're just basically trying to make it back to the border without getting our heads chopped off.
And on this film, that's easier said than done, because cast members, including Michael Fassbender, Dominic West and Olga Kurylenko, have really been put through their paces.
Scotland was pretty tough, yeah. That was, I think, the most difficult conditions I've ever shot.
I love playing a guy who actually existed and who was, 2,000 years ago. You're astonished at how tough these people were and what amazing fighters they were. They all came from Italy and they're fighting in Scotland in winter. It was equivalent to us going to Mars and coming across these Picts who are people covered in woad and blue faces, and it must be like meeting the Martians.
They were different back then, and they were made of sort of different ilk. I mean, we're just a bunch of wimps, pretending to be hard men. Well, David Morrissey's pretty hard.
Is that true? There's lots of fights in it, and we're just about to do a big battle scene now. So we're constantly doing it, but yeah, it helps to be fit.
I did a bit of prep myself, maybe sort of 4 or 5 weeks before we started, just going down to the gym. So yeah, just making sure that I'm not wheezing by the time I get to the camera,
We will not abandon you, sir. What's left of the Legion is yours to command, not go. I am a soldier of Rome! I will not yield!
So why is the uber-macho period actioner suddenly back in vogue? Could it be anything to do with another film, also shot in these clearly cinematic woods?
Gladiator had a huge influence. It revived a kind of genre that hadn't been seen for a long time. But as with everything that I try and do, I'm not trying to follow in the footsteps of somebody else, but trying to do it in a different kind of way.
Since the 70s, or when Monty Python were doing their swords and sandals, you couldn't really make a film for 20, 30 years after that because you just look ridiculous. And there's still a very fine line between it being hilariously funny, running around in this sort of gear, and it being, Gladiator.
Well, primarily I want it to look cold and, gritty and real. I'm not going to hold back on the blood and guts, because that's what it's like when you've got people going at each other with swords and axes and spears. So.
They may be having fun playing soldiers, but these actors are also suffering for their art.
Well, I don't know how the Romans conquered the world without pockets or flies. No, that's all I don't understand how they... It takes me half an hour to go to the loo in this thing, and I haven't even got my hat on.
Yeah, we have a little bit of rivalry. He's got a better plume. Well, I don't have a plume at all, actually, but He's good at prancing around, you know, posing.
Michael Fassbender and Dominic West have worked together 3 times now, including on period Peck's hit 300. So, who's stalking who?
I can't get away from him. I don't know what it is.
You know, I have a thing for Dominic, and that's out in the open now, I suppose. And
He always waits, looks for my next move, and then he seems to be there the next day.
Never mind, I'm sure Mr. West will have his vengeance in this life or the next. Just a reminder that Centurion will be in cinemas on the 23rd of April. Of course, whether you're on the wild